Arihito was an ordinary, sleep-deprived office worker who was on his way back from his company's mandatory fun team bonding trip, but all of a sudden, their bus got into an accident and Arihito, along with all of his coworkers, ended up dead. When Arihito gets to the afterlife, he quickly analyzes the situation and realizes he must have died somehow, so they are all waiting in line to be reincarnated. He is a little upset at first, but then he realizes that this means he doesn't have to go into work tomorrow, so this whole reincarnating thing may not be so bad after all. When it's finally his turn, he is met by his guide, but she doesn't really do much guiding. She just hands Arihito a card and tells him that when he gets there, the first thing he's going to want to do is head to the guild and register there. And before Arihito can even ask her what the guild is supposed to be, she shoves him forward, reincarnating him into Labyrinth country. Arihito doesn't really have much information to go off, so he decides to head the guild like the guide told him to, and when he gets there, he finds a girl dressed in his company uniform already at the desk. He recalls that she was on the same bus as him, and she is apparently here to register just like him. Her name is Suzuna, and after being evaluated, she was given the job of a shrine maiden. She thanks the receptionist for her help and is about to leave the guild hall, but just then, a girl gets in front of her to get her attention. Suzuna asks her if she did something wrong since she's still new in town, but Ilaikia already knew that because anyone who's registering at the guild for the first time must be a newbie who just got reincarnated here. She tells Suzuna she didn't do anything wrong, it's just that Ilaikia is currently looking for someone to act as the rearguard in her party because her vanguard job has a bit of a flaw. The others at the guild all notice Ilaikia trying to recruit yet another newbie, and they start placing bets on how long Suzuna will last before she ditches Ilaikia because as long as Ilaikia has that handicap, she'll never make it far. Arihito overhears everything they say, but he isn't sure what they mean by it. Ilaikia continues to plead with Suzuna to join her party, and to her surprise, Suzuna actually agrees to join her. Ilaikia was half expecting her to walk away after she heard the rumors, so she asks her if she's sure about it, and Suzuna says she is, so the two leave the guild together to go on their first mission. After they are gone, the receptionist calls out to Arihito and asks him if he is here to register his license as well, and he confirms that he is, so she asks him to come over so she can help him get started. The receptionist introduces herself as Luisa, and she explains that in Labyrinth country, only registered adventurers are allowed to enter labyrinths, so Arihito will have to get an official registration if he wants to get started. She asks him to hand her his license card, but before that Arihito asks her what she means when she says this is Labyrinth country. Luisa explains that this is a nation that is home to many seekers who explore labyrinths, and those who support them. Every so often, people's souls reincarnate into Labyrinth country, and they start new lives as seekers, so everyone is used to the process by now. Arihito is still having a hard time remembering how exactly he ended up dying, but he gets the gist of what's going on here, so he asks Luisa how exactly he's supposed to register, and she explains that the process is pretty simple. All he needs to do is pick out a job that he thinks suits him best, and then, if the system determines that his skills are a match, it will be approved. Arihito takes some time to think things over, and he recalls how he was worked to the bone by his overeager manager in his past life, but now that he's in Labyrinth country, he doesn't want a repeat of last time, so he decides to give himself a job that will let him live an easy and laid-back life. However, a moment later, he hears the shrill voice of his manager standing behind him, and it nearly gives him a heart attack. His manager's name is Igarashi, and he didn't think he'd run into her here too, but then again, since the entire team got reincarnated, it makes sense that she'd be here as well. She's still having a hard time believing that all this is real since it looks like a cosplay event in here, but she's just going to have to get used to the reality that they are going to have to fight monsters in this world to survive. Arihito doesn't understand what she means by that, but Igarashi explains that that's what the seekers around here all do for a living, so they are going to have to do the same. She then asks Arihito if he has chosen a job yet, and Arihito has a bad feeling about this since, with her bossy personality, she's probably going to try to pressure him into taking a job that is convenient for her, so he quickly changes the subject and asks her what job she picked out for herself. Igarashi is a little upset about the fact that Arihito is still speaking to her so formally here since she isn't his boss anymore, and she was hoping they could have a more equal relationship, but she explains that she chose the and apparently, that means she will be able to use some spirit magic. Arihito says that sounds like quite the impressive job, and Igarashi goes on to explain that in a party, one of the most important factors is how many tasks can be split between party members. Arihito thanks Igarashi for the useful information and says he's going to pick a job that's useful for his future party members, but Igarashi is shocked to hear him say it like that. She was hoping he would want to form up, but the idea of teaming up with her clearly never even crossed his mind, and Igarashi is disappointed by that. Still, she doesn't let her disappointment show and says goodbye for now. As Igarashi is walking away, Arahito realizes that she seemed a little different from the way she usually acts around him just now, but he chalks it up to her just being shaken by the whole reincarnation thing. Just then, Luisa asks Arahito if he is ready to choose his job yet, but he still has no idea what to pick, so she decides to explain a bit more about jobs to him. She says a seeker's job directly affects their contribution points, and contribution points are basically an indicator of how much a party member contributes to the team's overall performance, including killing monsters, finding treasure, and saving teammates. The number of points you have determines your place on the leaderboard, which in turn determines your status in Labyrinth Country. In essence, it determines whether you get to eat good food or have to sleep in a stable at night, so it's pretty important. Arahito doesn't want to end up in a stable, so he wants to pick something that is high in demand. He recalls that Elikia was looking for a rearguard, so he asks Luisa if rearguards are in demand, and she tells him that they most certainly are because they help support the party from behind and are vital to mission success rates. Hearing this, Arahito decides to write rearguard as his job, but he fails to realize that rearguard is just a general name for support jobs, so when Luisa sees that he actually wrote down rearguard, she's at a loss because she has never had something like this happen before, and she has no idea what Arahito's abilities are going to be either. So she hates to say this, but she tells Arahito that he's probably going to struggle with forming a party. She feels a bit responsible for Arahito's situation since she didn't properly explain things to him, so to help him out a little, she gives him some mercenary tickets for him to use until he figures out what his strengths and weaknesses are. On his job card, he sees that he has a wide range of skills he is allowed to spec into, and they range from things like defense support and attack support all the way up to recovery support. The skills all seem pretty useful, but what Arahito is most interested in right now is upping his defense, and after testing defense support, he's thinking about speccing into recovery support so he can heal. But after thinking about it some more, he decides to hold off on that since he doesn't know if there are potions or any other methods of healing. Thus, he decides to put his first point into defense support, but as he does so, he doesn't see any noticeable changes to his body. There's no way for him to know if he really screwed himself over or not with the job until he actually joins a party, so he's just going to have to go with the flow. He heads over to the mercenary guild to see what he can do with those tickets he was given, and the ticket apparently allows him to pick out a mercenary to fight on his side temporarily, so Arahito asks if he can get a vanguard fighter who uses a shield. The woman explains that the only merc they have left is a lizard woman, but she's a rogue, so she should be plenty useful to Arahito. Arahito really just wants to get an opportunity to test out his support spells, so he agrees to hire the lizard woman, and the attendant walks away to go call her over. While she's gone, Arahito begins wondering what a lizard woman would look like, but when she returns, he is shocked to find out that the lizard woman is a pretty girl. He is informed that her name is Teresa, but Arahito is having a hard time believing that she's really a lizard person since she looks pretty much human. The attendant clarifies that Teresa is actually a former human, but that just confuses Arahito even more, so she explains that a demi-human is what a human turns into if they are killed by a monster in the labyrinth. However, in some cases, it is possible to revert them to their original form afterwards, which is what happened to Teresa. Even though her form was restored, it's not possible to communicate with her, and she is only capable of following orders given to her in this state. Arahito is a little weirded out by the whole arrangement, but he doesn't have much of a choice if he wants to make progress in this world, so he introduces himself to Teresa and tells her she'll be working with him for now. He feels bad about making a little girl like this fight for him, so he wants to find the weakest monsters possible so he can test out his support spells, and after that, he will call it a day. As he arrives at the entrance of the labyrinth, a group of seekers notice that he's a newbie and come over to say hello. The leader of the group is called Rearguard, and he explains that their group works as a labyrinth rescue team. Basically, whenever someone is hurt in the dungeon and can't move, they get sent in to help them escape, but they can't be everywhere at once, so they remind Arahito that he needs to be really careful in there. Arahito asks if it's really that dangerous in the dungeon, and Rearguard tells him that he probably doesn't have anything to worry about since he has a mercenary with him, so as long as he doesn't target monsters above his level, he should be fine. However, he makes it clear that if Arahito happens to run into a named monster, he should run away immediately because he stands no chance of beating something like that. Arahito thanks him for the warning and promises to keep that in mind as he heads in, and once he crosses the threshold of the labyrinth, he and Teresa find themselves in a wide open field. It's not long before they come across a monster out there, and since it looks like a harmless fluffball, Arahito doesn't think it's much of a threat, but Teresa, on the other hand, is well aware of how dangerous that thing is, so just as it's about to attack, she jumps in front of Arahito and blocks it for him. This shaves away a good chunk of her life, and Arahito is shocked when he sees this because he never could have imagined that a level 1 monster would be this strong. The monster attacks again, so Teresa blocks its strike again, but she won't be able to hold up much longer, so Arihito needs to do something quick, and that's when he remembers the defense support skill he unlocked earlier. He uses the skill to create a shield around Teresa to protect her from the fluffball's attack, and after stunning it with a pellet from his slingshot, Teresa manages to slice it in half, killing the monster on the spot. Arihito is relieved that they managed to take the monster down, but he also feels a little guilty about how hurt Teresa got since he could have prevented it by using his defense support skill from the start. He apologizes to her for not taking things seriously earlier because he now understands that this is a life or death matter, and he is going to do his best to protect her just as much as she protected him. He then asks her if she would like to return to the surface since she's hurt pretty bad, but she nods, signaling that she's okay with continuing. Just then, the two of them hear a scream coming from over there, so they go sliding down the hill and find a party, including Igarashi, who have ended up face to face with a named monster, and Arihito can already tell that this isn't going to end well.